Namaste. I'm Kamala Devi, and it's that time of month. What I mean by that is it's my monthly newsletter or check-in with, my global community. It's just a time for me to say um, what's in my heart, to share a little bit of my morning musings. I like to, stay in touch. And one of the fun conversations I've been involved in, actually just last night, we were driving home from the Mexican hot springs and we got into a conversation about labels and identity. And I thought, oh, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic because my son was with us. We were actually with 52 tantrikas in the hot spring. Sounds like the beginning of a joke. But there is this annual gathering that happens in the desert, and he's been going since he was itty bitty, and now he's 12, and he's actually like driving the truck across the desert lake bed where you can't bump into anything. So it's really fun to see his development. And he was sharing, in the car, we were sharing with a new lover whose first time it was. And they were talking about, this, how do we describe these extraordinary experiences that we're having with the the outside world, like that dual experience of being, for her, in the closet a bit. And she calls this conscious community. And we talked about how that's, the languaging conscious community can be really isolating because that implies then this community is not conscious. Or sometimes we'll hear people talk about the magical world and the muggles, and it creates this almost, separation or judgment. And the intention behind, labeling is, I think it's to express ourselves, but then when it becomes a judgment, either we're judging others or others are judging us by that label, it becomes like it creates more separation and harm. I want to talk about this, in the broad sense, because I know I've gotten a lot of flack as one of the advocates of polyamory and one of the leaders who uses that term. Ethical non-monogamy is a broader term and more inclusive, but polyamory expresses a very specific type of way of doing it that's sometimes very helpful for other people who are doing it that way. And of course, right now in this historic moment when I believe diversity is the forefront of our conversation, and acceptance and tolerance, it's important to be sensitive to what labels people are using. I've often called myself, tantric and kinky and poly and bisexual, and even the term bisexual is really upgrading for me to non-binary and to bisexual is binary, so it'd be more like pansexual, omnisexual, and then that becomes very confusing. Bisexual is very accepted socially. Pansexual is like WTF for a lot of people. So then the burden becomes on educating, and sometimes you want labels to just be shortcuts, or as opposed to, and sometimes you want it to be a conversational opener, which is why so many people say, well, I'm fluid, or I don't like labels, and I honor that. But I also honor that labels can create a container, and people like to think of it like, I don't want to be boxed in, I don't want to be in a box, but my husband likes to say, I like to party in the box. You create a box like a cauldron and we stir it up, and we're not attached to that container. We can go into other containers. And so the essence of this teaching, which I talked to my son about, is how do we empower ourselves with labels and not limit or imprison ourselves? And the conversation with my son came up because he said, Mom, I don't even know what religion we are. He says, we do all these rituals, but what are we what are we? And, and it's like, if you say, oh, we're spiritual, not religious, that doesn't necessarily transmit, the essence of or the uniqueness of what we're doing. I know Michael is really comfortable with and is really moving in this shamanic realm and just says, oh, it's shamanism as an umbrella. But others have some concern that that's cultural appropriation and there's controversy around that. And I shared with my son, I feel really non-attached, like to the various labels or titles, but I do feel a lot of alignment when I say I pull from paganism and I mix in like Jewish mysticism. And there's also this deep yogic Hindu lineage that I'm pulling from. And to actually share and honor, those different lineages is valuable. But then not to kind of say it in such a way that it's like, it's not necessarily tantric or not necessarily, it's just, I'm inspired by is a lot of how I like to label it. And what's beautiful is it's all kind of like decorating the doorway is what the identities and the labels are. But once you go through the door and you're in the experience, that doesn't matter. Like it is a direct experience and we want to express our essence without getting over-identified, which ultimately limits, our infinite potential. So it was really a sweet conversation to be having with my son, and it was something I wanted to bring to my community. And I am curious, my kitty cat, what you feel comfortable with, what labels or non-labels that you like to use and share. So I wish you a wonderful, magical month, and I look forward to seeing you perhaps at one of the invitations, one of the retreats and events where we'll be having more direct experience, beyond even words can capture. So I look forward to connecting with you then.